to In the News for December 5th, 2025. I am Brett Burney from appsandlaw.com.
And this is Jeff Richardson from iPhone JD. Hey, Brett.
Hello, Jeff. Good morning. Glad to see you back. And wow, some news this past week. Like, what in the world is going on at the executive level at Apple? Oh, my goodness. You actually started off with your post today with a story about the general counsel that she's going to be leaving. There was another announcement that Lisa Jackson, who has been really in the spotlight, I think, over the last couple of years from Apple. But the big story that I even knew about was the UI chief, right? I guess he had something to do with AI as well. Steve LeMay was, I think, poached by Meta, if I'm not mistaken.
No, it's actually it's Alan Dye who was poached. Yeah, Alan Dye.
Okay, so
left.
There's all kinds of things going on, like so much that happened this past week. Okay, walk it down for us, please.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. I think the first one that actually hit the news, I mean, I guess you could go even further back than that. There was a guy named John Giandrea who was originally brought from Google to do AI stuff. And then he was sort of pushed in the back and was doing more background research.
That's
and then
right.
he announced that he's going to leave. So, that was sort of, but again, he wasn't a high level executive. He wasn't a high level person, but he wasn't in that core group of vice presidents that you see on Apple's executive leadership webpage, where they've got like the 10 people that all report to Tim Cook. And so, but those are the people that are perhaps most important at Apple. And so then we've had, this, string of people. So Alan Dye, first of all, who is somebody that I had heard of, but I really got to know just this past WWDC, when Apple unveiled the liquid glass interface, which of course changed the look of everything.
Huge,
he was the one that did the presentation. And of course, there's no way he would have been the one that did the presentation if everybody had known he was about to leave. There was a fascinating article by John Gruber at Daring Fireball, where he basically said, good riddance. He has
I know that's a little harsh.
Very harsh. He has talked to so many people at Apple who were not impressed with this gentleman's abilities to do design. And, again, I don't know. Who knows? Maybe John's right. Maybe he's wrong. But, some people feel the same way as him. So, I don't think that he was pushed out by Apple at all. The sense is that he just got a position that he wanted more. But maybe the writing was on the wall, and maybe he also wasn't happy with where he was at Apple. Obviously, he wasn't happy if he decided to leave. So, but what John Gruber's saying is, thank goodness that was like who for Apple, in his opinion, because he thinks that people that are going to do a better job with design. And so the person that they have moved up, the person that you just named Steve LeMay, is somebody who's been at Apple for a very long time. I mean, I want to say the 90s or something like that. In fact, the funny story that was in the Cult of Mac article, who was it? Ed Hardy? I forget who wrote this, but it was I'm sorry, Leander Kahney. Yeah, Leander wrote it, that apparently, I think back in the 90s when Steve Jobs came back to Apple, he was in a meeting, Steve Jobs was in a meeting with this person, Steve LeMay, and somebody said the word Steve, and it was confusion over which one he was talking about. And
which
so
Steve?
Jobs says, you know what, we're going to call you Margaret from now on. And according to the story, people still call him Margaret. I mean, heck, if Steve Jobs gave me a nickname, I don't care what it is.
I would, whatever it is, I would be okay. Yeah.
That would be funny. So, but anyway, the scuttlebutt that you're seeing from these reports, and again, I don't know this from Adam, but this guy from Adam, is that he's really good and he's excellent with user interface. I mean, the thing is, like, here's the big picture here that John Gruber talks about. App user interface design is so important for Apple. It has been for decades. And some people and Alan Dye, he says, was part of this camp, want something new just because it looks new. But other people say, well, it's fine for it to look new, but it's really got to be usable. The good example of that is there are times when liquid glass, especially on a Mac, it's impossible to read the text. And like, that's a huge usability thing, right? You can't have, I don't care how pretty the, lickable design looks like. If you can't read text, that's a problem. And so it's that old form over function debate that people have talked about for forever. And so the hope is that this person that's going to now be in charge, who I'll affectionately refer to as Margaret, that he will, because he's much more of the importance of user interface. And like, you want it to look good. You want it to look cool. That's what Apple's all about. But part of looking good is how useful it is and how intuitive it is. And so it would be nice if John Gruber's correct, and if a result of this transition of this, is that Apple moves back to its roots in some ways on design. So that was one transition, but then those people are not at that C-suite level. The ones that you started to talk about, the general counsel of any company is obviously a huge, big position, and Lisa Jackson as well. The general counsel position at Apple has, Apple just by the nature of the company, especially if it's gotten so big, people are suing it all the time. Governments are regulating it not all the time. There's all these,
All over the world too.
things that
Yeah.
people at Apple might want to do because they consider it better for the user experience, but other people's might consider it anti-competitive. And we've seen so much on that. I mean, it is a very complicated decision, not to mention all the IP and all the patents and everything else. So, my hat's always been off to the people that have been really good general counsel. I mentioned in my article that the person who had been before her, who was Bruce Sewell, I always heard really good things, all the scuttlebutt
Yeah.
about Bruce Sewell, that he did a fantastic 8 jobs at Apple. And everything that I think that for the most part, Kate Adams has done a really good job too. I mean, I think it's probably been harder for her general counsel job than perhaps any other general counsel in the history of Apple.
Oh,
And
interesting.
so
Okay.
after 8 years, I could see her saying it's time to move on. But the background of all of this is the rumors that Tim Cook is looking to step down as CEO. He's been
Uh-huh.
CEO for an incredibly long time, and he's getting up there in age. And the rumor is that he might move to just being chairman of the board, a position that he could hold on to for another decade. And so he
Right.
could still, be the person that, talks to the Trump administration and all that sort of stuff, but let somebody else, somebody younger, like, for example, the rumors that it's going to be John Turnus, who's been at the company for a very long time and is incredibly smart, maybe
Yeah.
let him run the company. And well, I think that would be a fantastic situation of, keep Tim around in that chairman board, but have somebody new as the CEO. And that would be a good transition for the next 10, 20 years of Apple.
Yeah.
But if you're going to do that, if you're going to have the new sheriff in town of John Turnus, it would make sense that he should have the people that report to him should be the people that he the best for him. And I'm not that these people that are currently there wouldn't be loyal. I'm sure they would be. But if I'm someone like Kate Adams and I've been there for 8 years and maybe I'm thinking of retiring, and she would know for sure if Tim Cook is going to retire in the next year, maybe this is the time for you to announce that you're stepping down. And so we can have a new set of
Hmm.
people, a younger generation under John Turnus. I mean, I'm not saying that Apple has planned all of this stuff. I certainly don't think they plan for Alan Dye to leave, but my hope, and this is just looking for a silver lining perhaps, but my hope is that this, 5 years from now, we look back and say 2026 was a huge transition year for Apple, and the company is so much stronger as a result. And it's tough to say because Apple is like one of the number one companies in the world. So like, how do you get
Right.
even better? But one last thing I'll mention, you mentioned Lisa Jackson, and you said that that might be the even bigger one for
Hmm.
you. And I mean, environmental concerns have been so important. If I remember correctly, when
Very. Yeah.
Apple hired, and I guess it was Steve Jobs who did so, when he hired Lisa Jackson, and she had previously run the EPA. She's
Right.
some sort of like a chemical engineer by training or something like that. But she's from New Orleans, which is something I like since I'm from New Orleans. But she's done amazing things with Apple, and apparently she's been the one that makes sure that, like, their products are using recyclable things and renewable resources and pushing Apple to be more green. And one of the things that we love about Apple is not only do the products have amazing user interface design and they work so well, but you feel good about them because you know that the company cares about the environmental
Yeah.
footprint of its products, and that just makes you feel better. Not only are you using something that you love to use, I love my iPhone, but it's nice to know that there's more recyclable parts and low carbon footprint. And she's been incredible. This one's interesting because the press release that you're showing right now makes it seem like they're not going to directly replace her. Part of
Hmm.
her job had to do with government stuff, and that part is going to go under the general counsel. And another
Right.
part of her job,
See
which
that.
was the pure environmental stuff, is going to move to is it the chief operating officer of the company? And so that could be because they are completely deciding they don't need that position anymore, or it's occurred to me because I think this is what happened when they hired her in the first place. To This is a tough position. You got to find
Yeah.
somebody that's smart, that understands it, but is also understands the politics. Like, it would not surprise me if, she transitions, she leaves in January, the job gets transitioned to other people throughout the course of 2026. And then Apple, maybe John Turnus, if he's in charge, they start to look for someone new. And if they find someone that they believe is perfect, well, then maybe they put someone else in that type of a position in
Right.
2027. Who knows? I
Right.
mean, anything's possible. I hope that all of these transitions, some of which we now know are going to happen, others like Tim Cook retiring are still just a rumor. I hope that in this period of transition, Apple, doesn't lose what we all love about the company, obviously making good
Of
products and
course.
everything else. Not that Apple
Right.
doesn't make mistakes. So anyway, it's an interesting thing. And the general counsel particularly interested me because as an attorney, I've always thought, like, gosh, if you work in-house at Apple, let alone
That
in the
would
general
be,
counsel position, oh
yeah.
my goodness, what a way to use your law degree. Wow.
I think I mentioned Lisa Jackson just because it seems like since we've been doing this podcast that she's been having a more of a spotlight role, and it because over the years when they have done some of these keynote presentations, like I remember her standing on top of the roof of
the Apple
of the
Park. Yeah, I
spaceship.
remember that too.
Yeah, because it was just like I had never seen her, and I just looked it up. She's been there since 2013, so maybe about 8 years or so, which I had just thought maybe it was even newer than that. And then I remember, was it last year, Jeff, that they had that commercial with Mother Nature? I don't think Lisa Jackson was in there, but I remember them being in that room. Like Apple, just over the last 2 to 3 to 5 years, I feel like have doubled down on some of that environmental stuff, and they're just always touting how much that they're doing on the recycling side. And I guess I just thought that it was a surprise to me. I thought that position would continue on in such a higher profile that or that Apple would continue to maybe double down, triple down on some of that. And it was just interesting because I feel like Lisa Jackson, even though I didn't really know her, just anytime that she was put in that spotlight, I thought she did a really good job. And I just think that
so
that's
you said it was 2013 she came to the company. Is that what you found? Okay, so Steve Jobs died in 2011, so it was Tim Cook who hired her, not Steve Jobs. I just knew that she had been around for a long time. There was a funny video that I linked to, and we may have even talked about it on in the podcast in the past. A few years ago, Tim Cook was in New Orleans, and Lisa Jackson was there with him because, of course, she's here, and like she was taking him around to like all the restaurants, not really fancy places, but even sort of like little more hole in the wall po' boy places and stuff.
Yeah, they went to Domelice's, right? Or Dookie Chase's, right? Or so exactly. I remember that.
You don't go to Domelice's unless you got a local with you.
Somebody knows exactly.
Yeah, I love Domelice's, but the fact that Tim Cook knows it too is funny. So anyway,
okay. So real quick, just back to the UI thing, the Steve LeMay, because I don't know Margaret. I haven't known, but if he has been there since '99, then obviously he worked under Johnny Ive for many years, right? I mean, and there has to be a quite a bit of inspiration from the design aspect. In fact, there's some nice stories here in this story from Leander here that I don't even see Johnny Ive in some of this. This is, what do they call this? The iPhone software design team. And that's like the original. Now this is the design team, not the engineering team, which I know I think are a little bit different, but it just occurs to me. It's like, is some of this still a fallout from Johnny Ive leaving? He's been gone now 3 years, something like that. Maybe not quite that many, but it's like these are still people that worked probably very closely with Johnny Ive. They just weren't in the spotlight as much.
Yeah, I mean, and we should say what we're talking about here with his job and with Alan Dye leaving. This is not hardware design. This is not designing the iPhone. This is software design, user interface design. Now, Johnny Ive, of course, was started with hardware design, but near the end of his tenure, especially after Steve Jobs died, I think to sort of give people reassurance about the company, they also put him in charge of software. And there are some people that argue that maybe Johnny Ive was not as good on the software side as he was on the hardware side. You can make debates on that. But even though I don't know that he was necessary, well, he certainly would have been directly under Johnny Ive at the end. But the John Gruber article theorizes that, this person's, Margaret's, is far more of the Johnny Ive world of, really understanding design and doing it well. Whereas Alan Dye was not. And, he sort of remarks that, we all know that Johnny Ive is now at that new company that's called IO, or it might be called IO. They're having quite problems in the courts about that name. He's like, Alan Dye would never be hired, according to John Gruber, by Johnny Ive, because they did not get along. So
Johnny left June 2019 was when he left Apple.
There you go.
June 2019. Okay. So it's been like 6 years almost. Wow, that's time flies. That's a little crazy. Okay, I just wanted to point that. I guess I just wanted to ask that because it just seems like maybe that's some of why it is a good move. And I'm going to cling to John Gruber's thoughts on this. I mean, obviously he's got a lot of people internally, and I think I even see in here, or one of these areas, they were talking about another like inside person from Apple. Oh, here it is right here. Steve LeMay is by far the best designer I have ever met or worked with in my entire life. This is somebody that used to work at Apple, apparently. Software designer, former colleague, software designer. Anyway, just interesting stuff like that. Okay, we can move on. I hope that wasn't too boring for everybody, but we always are interested in sort of some of those moves, at the top level or middle level, bottom level. It doesn't really matter. Just always interesting to kind of see how Apple is moving along or bumping along, however it goes. But let's go to something where I would guess that Steve LeMay, Margaret LeMay would have had some influence on, is the iPad mini. What, you say? Jeff and Brett, are you talking about
Mhm.
the iPad mini and not the iPad Pro? How dare you? But I remember you teased us about this a few weeks ago, Jeff, that your firm was getting some iPad minis, even though
Mhm.
we all know you are a huge fan of the iPad Pro, the larger version. And
Yeah.
so am I. I still have one that's now, I think mine was from 2021, and I still love my iPad Pro. I want to update it pretty soon. But we don't hear a lot of people talking about the iPad mini. When it first came out, I mean, I had at least the first two generations and I loved them. It was just, every time I say iPad mini, my hand goes like this because I just have this idea that I could hold it in one hand and I love that. But now you have one based on the i17 Pro processor chip.
Mhm.
And you wrote a review a couple of weeks ago about this. And I found it fascinating that A, you're even going back to an iPad mini, and B, it's not bad. I mean, we know it's not the specific iPad that you're going to reach for every single time, but it's pretty good the way that it is. And there's still a little slot in the world for the iPad mini.
It is an adorable device. I mean, it's just so cute.
Adorable.
You
I
hold
like
it in one hand. I had the first generation iPad mini and I really enjoyed using it. I often used it with my, regular size iPad at the time. Sometimes I would travel and I would sort of have like my iPad dual screen setup, like a regular
Yeah.
iPad, and then my iPad mini next to it. And I would be looking at things like email on my iPad mini, and I'd be working on a document in the iPad. Um, Ever since I moved up to the iPad Pro with the big 13-inch screen, 12.9 now 13-inch screen, there's enough real estate on my iPad that I can run, especially with the iPad OS 26. It's easy to run multiple apps and stuff like that. So I
Yeah.
don't have a need for it. But when I had this opportunity at my firm about a month ago, because they bought a bunch of these minis for a project that we're doing here, and they weren't ready to use it yet. They're like, "Do you want to just play with it for a few weeks?" I'm like, "Sure." So it was
Absolutely.
fun to go back and try it out. And I will tell you, I ended, and because I'm about to give this back. My overall impression of it was not as favorable as I thought it would be, because
Okay.
although I love that it's so light and you can sit there, and if you're doing things like reading Instagram or Reddit or even just scrolling through emails to a certain degree, it's so nice and small and it weighs nothing, and that is awesome. But as a tool to get work done, it's just too small. I mean, the picture you're showing
Yeah.
right now that
Yeah.
has it on top of my iPad Pro, and I
Yeah.
know this is, it's like those, really small person, really tall person,
That's
it's
crazy.
less than half the size of my iPad screen. And that is too small for most of the things that I do for work, for reading documents, for annotating documents, for reading emails, for looking at Microsoft Word documents, for,
Mm.
all of the work type things I want to do. You can use the Apple Pencil with it. I mean, you can, so even the Apple Pencil too. So you could
Oh,
take notes on it.
really?
And, part
Okay.
of me is like, oh, well, it's almost like a little steno pad, and that's really nice. But I have found that it was just a little too small.
Okay.
Maybe that's something that if I got used to it more might work, but I just prefer having a bigger, a pad for when I take notes, because I take handwritten notes all the time, something more like a legal pad in size. And I just found it a little small. I also found it slower than I thought it would be. You
Oh,
mentioned that it has
really?
the
Yeah, I
A17
see
Pro
it.
processor,
Yeah.
which is the processor. So this, unlike other iPads that often have like the M series processor, what they put in the computers. I have an M4 and they now have an M5
Right.
iPad. This A17 Pro trip was something that was in the iPhone just about 2 years ago. And so I thought, well, the iPhone Pro. And so I'm like, well, since it was only a few years ago that was in the iPhone Pro, maybe this is actually going to be a fine chip for an iPad. And it is a fine chip for an iPad. But I tell you, Brett, maybe I'm just spoiled, because when you don't really realize how responsive and fast something is
Hmm.
until you leave it. And
That's
then you're
right.
like, oh, wow, I miss it.
Or you
And
compare it.
if
Yeah.
one thing the iPad mini did is it made me appreciate how snappy my iPad Pro is,
Okay.
because things like everything I do, opening an email, opening a document, doing this, going to Dropbox, everything just takes that extra second or two of time. And I'm like, oh. And I don't even notice that on my iPhone, even though my iPhone's probably not quite as fast as my iPad Pro, but I did notice it here. And it's everyone's a little bit, but every one of them sort of grates on you a little bit and stuff like that. Plus,
Yeah.
the screen is not as
Adds up.
nice when you scroll through things, because it doesn't have in the promotion display. It's like it's harder to read things as they're
Oh,
scrolling, so you need to
yeah.
wait and look at it. So it's just got a lot of compromises. But I will admit that, let me be clear. As someone who has the highest end, most expensive iPad Pro, well, not most expensive because I don't have the M5 version, but maybe I'm the worst person to compare it. If you hadn't had an iPad in a while, then you're not going to notice a decrease in speed because you weren't moving something else. And if you're using just a lower end iPad or even an older iPad Air, then maybe you'll just appreciate the smaller size, and then it weighs nothing in your hand. I mean, you're leaning back reading something. It's just like holding a piece of paper. It weighs nothing, which is really, really nice. So there are some advantages to it. And for some people that might like it. So let me end by saying,
Yeah.
most of my review and most of my thinking about this was, how is this as an iPad? And as you can just hear, for me, this is not enough iPad for me. But the interesting part is, and you're showing a picture right now, there's this rumor that Apple is going to be next year releasing a foldable iPhone. So something that, it's like my iPhone would open up and would close. So it would be as small as an iPhone. You can keep it in your pocket, but it would open up to have a larger screen for times where you wanted to have a little bit more screen, but you didn't want to pull out an iPad. And I was amazed that if we put my iPhone Pro 17 Pro Max, so it's really big screen, and if I put that on top of this mini, as you can see, it's not that far off.
Close. Yeah.
From what the screen size would be
Yeah.
for this rumored mythical folding iPhone that may or may not come out in a year or two, if ever. And the times that I thought this iPad mini worked best were the times when I wasn't replacing an iPad, I was replacing an iPhone. Like I said, scrolling through, my Mastodon client, Ivory, or scrolling through Reddit or something like that. The times that, here's another way to say it, the times that I was holding it in portrait mode, like an iPhone, as opposed to in landscape mode. In landscape mode, it was just too cramped. But in portrait mode, thinking of it as a bigger iPhone, it wasn't too bad. Or if I did have it in landscape mode, but like an unfoldable iPhone, that's when I think I got the most value out of it. And so it did make me think, if Apple does come out with this device, and the rumor is if they do, it would be very expensive, probably over $2,000, would I want to get a foldable iPhone? Or would I just want to stick with the next generation of what I have now? I don't know. I mean, I want to see what Apple has to say about it if the product comes out. But the iPad mini did allow me to start to think about that a little bit, which was really interesting. So it is a fascinating product. I know for some people, I mean, heck, in my office, we needed to have like a small little device that we're using for this AV thing that works with like Apple TVs and stuff like that. It was perfect to have something small. We're sticking it inside of one of these cases. It's got all the rubber on it and stuff like that. So it'll be nice and sturdy. The iPad mini is perfect for that. If you want something for a small child, if you want something for, your grandmother that just wants something small, but big enough to read, there are a million wonderful uses for this. And even though it's not, for me, a good thing for an attorney or other professional to use for work, it is delightful for sort of an entertainment device if the speed decrease doesn't matter to you. And there's rumors that Apple's going to improve the iPad mini next year, and maybe they would improve the screen and improve the processor, and that would get rid of some of the issues I had with it. Of course, it would still be a smaller screen, so it would still be too small for me to read documents on and annotate. But it's a really interesting product, and I cherish the fact that I had an opportunity, what has it been, 10 years now, to revisit what the iPad mini is all about.
I hear all of your statements and I agree with them all, but I think the only caveat I would say there is that it sounds like that's all true if the iPad mini would be your sole iPad. Like if that's the only iPad you've been, I guess over the years, Jeff, I felt like, and maybe even from the beginning when the iPad mini came out, I personally never looked at it as this is the iPad that can replace my bigger iPad, whether it was the 10-inch, 11-inch, or even the 13-inch, right? I mean, I feel like, from my observation, the iPad mini is really just becoming a unfortunately, however you want to look at it, it's just becoming almost like that single-use type of a device. Because I tell you, when most people that I talk to, when they're looking at an iPad mini, they're not looking at it to say, this is the iPad that I want. They're saying, do I get an iPad mini or do I get a Kindle Paperwhite or a small Remarkable, like just for taking notes, something like that. Like, I feel like the iPad mini, and I don't think that Apple is at least marketing it this way, but they got to be aware of this. I mean, the only reason that I feel like I would get an iPad mini today is because I want a smaller iPad or a smaller device to read books on. That's really what it comes down to. Or maybe to your point, I was like hearing about, using it in portrait mode as like a bigger iPhone screen. But then at that point, why am I spending, $4.99 or $3.99? Because you even linked to an Amazon has it for $3.99. Why would I spend $3.99 just for a device that I'm just going to use for reading books on when I could go get a Kindle for something less, or some other, device that
Yeah.
would be much less expensive. Does that some of that make sense? Like I feel like
I agree.
I would never look at the iPad mini from, again, personally, as this is my only iPad, this is the replacement, this is the iPad I'm going to buy. I feel like the iPad mini this is the extra device that I would get in addition to the actual iPad that I would use every day for actual work, to your point.
I'm glad you raised that point because that's very insightful. And you're right that when I previously had an iPad mini, the first generation 10 years ago, even then I didn't consider it my main iPad. I consider it an ancillary. But the reason that I compare it to my iPad Pro is that I was looking for times, for me, what I wanted the iPad mini to do was fill a hole in my life. Much like the original one we did 10 years ago.
Okay.
And for me, it didn't have to replace my iPad. I was fine with the fact that I would do some things on my iPad Pro and some things on the iPad mini.
Okay.
But what I found is that more times than not, whatever the task was, I'm like, it just makes more sense to use my iPad Pro for this.
You go to the
The other extreme, I would say it just makes more sense for me to use my iPhone for this because it's even smaller in my hand, right? I'm just sitting there on the couch and I want to scroll through stuff.
Okay.
And so what it was amazed is I thought there was going to be this big middle ground that the iPad mini would be this delightful way to fill it. And instead what I found is like, it was such a narrow area of when it made more sense than my iPhone and more sense than my iPad Pro. And it just wasn't significant enough. Because believe me, I mean, when it came out a year ago, because it looked so cute and I thought it was powerful, I actually thought like, would this be something nice to ask for my birthday or Christmas or something, just like it would just be a fun extra device and stuff like that. But after using it for the last month and after trying to push myself to use it so I could really find what it did well and what it did not, I found, because my wife saw me playing with it and she's like, well, is that something you might want for your birthday? And I was like, to tell you the truth, no, because the one thing I've learned, and it was great to have a chance to try it myself, is that there's not enough times for me, there's not enough times when it fit that perfect little device. Others may disagree, but that was me.
Well, and again, when I see it in the wild, if it's an actual person, it's for something very specific. Like I see it reading books on an airplane is really the
perfect size for that. Yeah.
But I do see it though in the wild in like commercial instances, like just I think similar to what you're talking about. I see iPad minis when I go into a conference room of an organization, or sometimes when they're using, Square, like at a coffee shop, it's an iPad mini as opposed to a full size iPad, what they call the point of sales, right? POS devices, to where, that's what you're using to interact with, making some kind of transaction at a store or something like that. And so I would guess that Apple knows this, obviously, and I would suspect by far a huge percentage of the use of the iPad mini, it's probably going to be something in that commercial aspects there. I mean, obviously, I don't know, and Apple's never going to tell us, but that's the only times that I really see the iPad mini. And every time I think, it's so cute. Like I would like to have one, but I'm glad that you provided this review because I feel like it's grounded in the fact, like, yes, it's cute and it's a shiny object, but I don't know that I really need one, right? It's like, I'm just going to go and fondle one at the Apple store, every 6 months, and I'll be happy about that.
I mean, I could say the same thing about the brand new iPhone Air, right? I mean, it's great that they have it.
Great point.
But it's not for me. It's beautiful. It's fun that they have it, but it's not for me.
Okay, well, thank you for providing the review because I remember several weeks ago you talked about getting one, and even me, I was kind of like, "What? Like, what are you thinking? What are you gonna do with that?" And anyway, we'll see. I guess I still hope that Apple continues, like you said, to invest in it and to update it. I guess I can't really justify that comment very much, other than just the fact that I like that Apple is continuing to invest in sort of the iPad ecosystem, as it will. But it will be interesting. The most interesting thing is what you were just saying, like for the foldable iPhone, like, is this what they're trying to do? Is just, get it to with the fact that we can see how that's going to work. But okay, time will tell, and that'll be interesting. Okay, moving on. Another review that I was thrilled that you brought up today was the AirTag TimeCapsule. Well, I guess it's just called a TimeCapsule by Elevation Lab. I feel like they could have come up with a better name for that, but this was something that you reviewed almost a year ago now, which basically is I call it a container for your AirTag, where you're putting in AA batteries instead of the CR2032 or 2023 battery that you would normally put in the AirTag. This thing could last for years. I remember you did this review. I liked it then. And then what you talked about today is not only can you get the time capsule by Elevation Lab, the original one that you reviewed, but now there's a nice little cute compact one that you can also get today.
I think this is a really cool product because there are some times that you might want to have something that it's nice to have a tracker in it, but it's something that you just want to put it in there and never have to worry about it again. Don't get me wrong, AirTag
Yeah, I
batteries
like
do
this.
last a good year or so, and that's fine. But just the other day I got an alert that my luggage one was, it was running out of battery and I had to go replace
Yep.
it. And not that I was about to travel, but it does, we all know we replace the batteries and they're a little change. I
Yeah,
always
I've
think
got
it's
a
a little
package
hard to,
right here.
there you go. I always think it's a little
I
hard to
keep
replace the
them on
batteries because
hand.
you have to like twist the bottom of the AirTag and
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
But so I thought that this was a brilliant idea, and how funny that all you need to do is put some batteries in it, and then suddenly
Yeah.
it,
Here's your
it, it will
picture.
last up to 10 years. I mean, you use these Energizer, whatever they're called, these lithium ion
The
batteries. But
ultimate lithium. Yeah.
so I've got one in my car, and again, it will last forever. I never have to worry about it. I think this is a really cool idea for a product, but I will have to admit that 10 years is really almost too long because the reality is I'm not going to keep that time capsule in my car for 10 years because I'm sure
Right.
at some point, maybe next year, maybe 2027, Apple will come out with a new version of an AirTag that'll, who knows, it'll probably have some whiz bang features and maybe I'll replace it. So I thought it was really interesting when I saw that they now have a new one that they're selling that the price is just a little bit cheaper, but the real advantage of it is it's much smaller. I think maybe it uses AAA instead of AA batteries or whatever it is, or
Oh,
does it still
does it?
use
Yeah, you're
AA?
right. It does. Yeah, AAA
Yeah.
batteries in this one.
But it's smaller. It's
Nice.
it's really tiny and it'll last for 5 years, which I think is an incredibly long period of time. If you've got like, a boat or a piece of luggage or a car, just something
Yeah.
you want to put it in and never think about it. You never have to worry about the battery for all intents and purposes. Plus, there's some other advantages too. Both this small one and the big one that I reviewed that I own, it doesn't look like an AirTag. So like if somebody, I mean, I guess it would
Yes.
still beep at some
Right.
point, so maybe to
Sure.
give
Well,
itself
yeah.
away. But like if some bad guy was trying to steal something and they saw this, they probably wouldn't even necessarily know what it was. It doesn't scream AirTag or anything like that. But the time capsule that I have in my car, I mean, I doubt there are times when I will just, for no good reason, I'll just like double check, is my car still where I
Sure.
parked it? Yeah, it's just nice to know it's still there. And it's funny that the way they work, because enough people walk near it with their own iPhone that it picks up the location and sends it back to Apple. The whole AirTag technology is fascinating. So I just think this is a really cool product. I think it's nice that they're continuing to develop it. And now that they've got a smaller version, earlier this year when I bought the big version, I mean, not that it's that much less expensive. It's maybe $5 cheaper or something like that, $10 cheaper.
Hmm.
But I probably would have purchased a smaller version because it strikes me as even more useful. But if you wanted something for 10 years, you can get the bigger version. So I think it's a nice idea. It would make a good gift for somebody too. Now you have, just to be clear, you have to provide your own AirTag and you have to provide your own battery. So it's like either
And
20
your
bucks
own
for one.
hexagonal screw Allen wrench on
Well,
this.
actually, that does come with it, if I remember
Oh, it does.
correctly.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
yeah, it did. But it's either so it's 20 bucks for one, 30 bucks for two, or you can get four for 40 bucks. So they're only $10 a piece if you get four of them.
Yeah.
And
Right.
that's a few
That's
dollars
great.
cheaper than the big ones. But I just think it's a creative idea. Bravo to Elevation Lab for coming up with this a year ago, and I'm glad that they came out with the new version of it. Very cool.
Here's a tip from Jason Snell at Six Colors. This could have been one of our tips of the week here. Getting an
Hmm.
iPhone back on the Wi-Fi network. I read through this because it really just confirmed, oh yes, I've had to do this several times. But I like the fact that Jason put it in here. If you have an issue with your Wi-Fi network not connecting, especially in a place where you know it's connected in the past, or frankly, anytime that I've had an issue sometimes, Jeff, with like getting on the Wi-Fi or getting into LTE or whatever, I will go and do a reset, not on the entire phone, but just reset the network settings.
Yeah, this is an interesting article for two reasons in my mind. First of all, networking, whether you're talking about an iPhone, an iPad, a computer, you name it, it's one of those things that always just confuses me. There's just so much going on there. It's a lot of voodoo mumbo jumbo in the backyard and the background. And so if an iPhone is not connecting to Wi-Fi, the first interesting thing to me is that Jason goes through all the troubleshooting steps that he tried at first. And
Right.
those are the ones that
Right.
occurred to me. Simple things like turning off
Yeah.
Wi-Fi and turning it on again. Sometimes that solves the problem for me. Or turning off the iPhone and turning it on again.
That's right.
He has a
That's
good
right.
list, or disconnecting from the network and connecting again. He has a good list of like those first level troubleshooting techniques. But the one that he ultimately found that worked for, I think this is for his father-in-law or something like that, was this thing about the network resetting the network settings. I mean, I guess
Reset.
in the
Yeah.
back of my head, I knew that that was a thing, but I can't tell you it's something I would have jumped to. I mean, maybe eventually I would have gotten there. I certainly will now that I've gotten this article. So, bizarre things happen with Wi-Fi, with cellular, with all this sort of stuff. And so this article was a nice thing to sort of stick in my head of the next time it happens to me
Yeah.
or a friend or a family member. This is a good list of here's the different troubleshooting steps you want to go through because, it's wonderful that most of the time Apple products just work, but sometimes they don't. And when that happens, the people like you and me and anyone who listens to this podcast are most likely to be the people that others turn to for help. And so it's nice just to have this list of things you can try.
Well, I suspect one of the reasons people don't do this very much is because it sounds scary. Like you have to go into your iPhone settings, you go to general, and at the very bottom, there is, well, now in iOS 26, it's called transfer or reset iPhone. Well, first of all, who wants to reset the iPhone, right? I mean, you're going to, are you going to be offline? Now, I do this a lot, especially when I'm getting ready to trade in an old iPhone. This is exactly what you have to go and do. And there's one option here that sounds really scary. Erase all content and settings. Oh, who wants to do that, right? But right above it now in iOS 26, there's a reset button, and there is a whole slew, there's a whole list of things here. Reset all settings, delete all eSIMs, reset keyboard dictionary, reset handwriting style, reset home screen layout, reset location and privacy. But one of them is reset network settings. So the point that I'm making there is like, unless you are comfortable doing this, you've done it before, like you're not resetting the entire phone. You are just basically, and I think Jason talks about this in here, when you do erase network settings, you're just erasing all of the remembered Wi-Fi networks that you've connected to.
Right.
You are disconnecting all the Bluetooth items that you've connected to. And right there, that might turn some people off. Like, well, I don't want to have to go back and reset all those. Well, in some cases, this might be the next step to do. So it basically just resets everything that you've connected to from a network standpoint. And then, theoretically, and I think Jason walks through it here, that once you reset just the network settings, the rest of the iPhone is fine. Then it'll say, hey, I found your network here in your house. Do you want to connect to it? And you put in your password and you go on. And that just doing that is almost like, the tried and true troubleshooting step for Windows, reboot, right? Well, any computer for that matter, reboot. But instead of rebooting the entire device, you're just rebooting or basically resetting all of the network settings. And it works. I've done this several times and it's fine. It's just, yes, you do have to go back and like, I have to reconnect Bluetooth to my Apple Watch. I have to reconnect Bluetooth to my Bluetooth speakers. And some people just don't want to go through all of that. But in some cases, it's the thing that you need to do. Good stuff on that. Well, 'tis the season. How about some fun stuff real quick? We got 3 fun items. I remember, I think it was a year ago, we talked about this fun story. This is the Battersea Power Station over in, I guess, outside of London, if I'm not mistaken, right? In the UK.
I think that's right, yeah.
That Apple projected, it was Wallace and Gromit last week, if I remember, right? It was like these videos on these very stately looking, I guess they're sort of like the smoke columns or whatever it was,
I guess the smokestacks, I guess
smokestacks that they used to use. Now I think this is now a mall or a shopping mall or a business. It's business, I think is what it is, right? It's a business workspace there. But it's so cool that they've done these projections on these humongous smokestacks. And this year, it's not Wallace and Gromit, but it's iPad designed Christmas trees that are being broadcast and projected onto these crazy smokestacks, which is so much fun.
They apparently had a contest where you could like do your designs and send them in. And just looking at the picture you're showing right now, they look so cute. Cool. Some of these look like they're done by artists. Others look like maybe they're even done by kids. Who knows? But they're crazy designs, and I would love to go and see it in person because it's really interesting. I love that Apple does this every year, and for those of us that don't live in the UK, it's fun that we get a chance to sort of watch it, or see pictures of it or read stories about it and stuff. Yeah,
I love. Here's the video. I think we showed this last year. Where we showed it, but like you can see people walking back and forth down here, and I mean, it doesn't look that big. From the pictures that we're showing here, but
it is.
That's
big,
in a very imposing monument there. That's a huge building. Anyway, just thought that was really cool.
But like just from a technical standpoint, like to be able to project something into something that big, like I don't even know the technology, but that's really cool. It's neat. Yeah.
Not only that, but it's a weird shape on this, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like
yeah.
it's got a bigger bottom section, and then it looks like traditional smokestacks. And obviously the Christmas trees just work so beautifully in this, right? Because you've got the big bottom for the base of the tree, and then it goes up. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how you project that. I mean, yeah, it's got to be some magic that happens with the projection side. But that feel got me in the Christmas mood. Something else that
Indeed.
got me in the Christmas mood. If you were watching football during Thanksgiving like I was, you may have seen this weird little I mean, it was like a puppeteer commercial, and I was going to dismiss it until I saw an iPhone drop, and I'm like, wait a minute. This has got to be something either from T-Mobile, Verizon, or something, or it's an iPhone commercial, and I got to stop. And I got to see the actual commercial, but you, I think last week, linked to the making of the commercial. The commercial is called what is it? A Critter Carol, and it's
Yeah.
so cool. And the making of the commercial, I think, is even funnier than the actual commercial itself.
Apple has been coming out with these holiday commercials for I can't even remember how long. They always debut around Thanksgiving and they run all the way through, Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, so for about a 1 month period. And like you say, they show on network TV and stuff like that. And they're always very different. I mean, sometimes, they feel like an old, Rankin and Bass production. Sometimes they feel like stop motion. Sometimes they're live action.
Good analogy.
So this one has sort of a Muppet sort of feel to it. And again, at first it's like, is this even an Apple commercial? But then you realize the little critters are using iPhones to take a picture.
A dropped
So
iPhone. Yeah.
So it's a cute little, puts you in a happy mood for the holidays, which is nice. But as you said, Brett, the commercial itself was fun, but the making of it I thought was even more fun because they used iPhone 17 Pros to film it. Apple is promoting the fact that the iPhone in your pocket is just as powerful as what people use to film movies and stuff like that in some ways. And I just thought it was so fun to like see the puppeteers and how it takes like multiple people to have one puppet do its thing, and they have the iPhones, and it was just I thought it was fascinating. So watch the commercial because you want to have the context for it.
Do that
and it
first.
Is cute, but
I'll
then go back and give yourself 3 minutes to watch this. It was really cute.
My favorite part was that the puppeteers would stay in character. or I don't know. I don't even know that the animals talk in the actual commercial now that I'm thinking about it, but somehow they were in character in the puppet while they were doing the puppets, like walking through the studio. And that was just my favorite part.
Well, they do talk because they're singing a song, right? It's a song that's from Flight of the Conchords, which was an old show on Apple TV. Of all the places to pick a song, this is, Jermaine, I forget what those guys' names is. They're so creative. But, I never thought that a song from Flight of the Conchords on HBO would show up however many years, 10, 20 years later in an Apple holiday film. And yet the song really works. So bravo, whoever came up with that song.
You just mentioned Apple HBO Max. And I remember I think you linked to this today. Didn't the App Store winners were announced, right? And I think HBO Max was like the top Apple TV or the winner of the Apple TV App Store. Interesting on some of that. I just
other breaking news is HBO, which is owned by Warner Brothers, has been trying to sell itself for a while, and they just announced, was it yesterday, that Netflix purchased it, and so that's going to be fascinating to see how Warner Brothers, which is all the movies, history, Casablanca and modern stuff, and it's HBO and everything. How is that going to all interface with Netflix? Is Netflix going to still bring movies to the big screen? I certainly hope so. But it'll be really interesting. And as you just mentioned, the HBO app and the Netflix app, are they going to remain separate apps? Is it going to be one big app? We just went through all the name changes for HBO for their Max and everything else. Is it going to be now called, Netflix box office? Who the heck? I don't know. We'll have to see. That's all breaking news.
I found the link that you had, and we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, the different apps that were up for nominations. And then where was it? It was try the bottom here, right? Because there's so many of them now.
There are so many,
There's different aspects. Well, maybe I already passed it up. But I remember the Apple TV was HBO Max was the winner in that, and just interesting. All right, last video, man. If you're not feeling good already after looking at the Battersea projection and the Critter Carol, watch this one today. Oh my goodness. The video is called "I'm Not Remarkable," but obviously it's a play on words in a way, because these folks that are in this movie are so remarkable. I teared up watching this just because it was so well done, so inspirational. And of course, between the lines, it highlights the accessibility features from Apple. And so if you can't really tell from this, all of these people that are the stars in this little video have some kind of a disability of some kind, and just how they're overcoming it from a college age perspective. This was just great. Thank you for linking to this today, Jeff.
Yeah, it makes me tear up to think about it too. Apple has always done such a great job with accessibility features.
Yes.
And I love that they put the effort into it. There was the infamous time, what was it, a decade ago, that somebody at a shareholder meeting said, to Tim Cook, why are you spending so much time on this stuff? And he's like, this is who we are. What are you talking about? Of course we want our things to be accessible to everybody. Plus, as you and I have talked about time and time again on the podcast, that, accessibility features that might be specifically designed for somebody who has vision issues or mobility issues, everybody can use them often in different ways. There are ones that I use it. So I love that Apple does this. So, they have, of course, they're going to toot their own horn, but this is a fun video. Apple, I think it was this week, what was it called? International Day of Persons with Disabilities. Not something I knew was a thing, but Apple used that as the occasion to celebrate this commercial. And it's just so fantastic. The person who's, in the front of the video, I don't know who she is. I mean, I guess she's either blind or has low vision, but her singing voice is amazing.
It's great.
The article that I linked to from Shelley Brisbane wrote for 6 Colors, Shelley Brisbane, who often writes about accessibility issues for Apple products. She was noting that the person that wrote the song, I think she said he does Broadway shows, something like that. It is a Tony Award-winning composer, Tim Minchin. The song is so catchy. I watched it yesterday. It made me tear up. I watched it again. It was so good. And then I was in the car driving to work this morning, and I found myself, how you have a song in your head? It was right there in my head because I was still sort of singing it because it's such a great song. So if you haven't watched this video yet, boy, do you have something delightful to look forward to. It's fantastic.
I think the other thing, just quickly, I want to say is they just don't even take themselves so seriously, right? They're even making fun of themselves because there's a line in the song about, you could even use your toes, because they're showing people that don't have hands or arms using their toes to type. But then there's one lady that doesn't have legs. And so she comes up and she's like, I don't have those. And, it's not really funny. I'm just taking it in the spirit that I'm presenting it.
It is funny.
But it's just the fact that they're not taking it seriously. And it's just that they're embracing, their quote unquote limitations or non-limitations. It just makes you feel good all over it. So I'm going to have to go watch it. So I sent it to the family this morning. I'm like, everybody just needs to watch this and feel good.
I sent it to my daughter last night because she's a high school senior and is starting to get acceptance letters for colleges.
Oh, there you go.
And this video starts with somebody getting acceptance letters for colleges. And I'm like, that's the excitement that we're going through in my house right now too.
Yes.
So,
yes. Okay. In the know. Tis the season that you're probably going to have people over to your house. And what's the first thing they do after they give you a hug? They need the Wi-Fi password. Am I right? They got to get online. They got to check everything. So, there's a few things, I've talked about this before, that today, if somebody else, connects or wants to connect to your Wi-Fi that has never done it before, then typically on other Apple devices, like an iPhone, typically it will pop up with some kind of a notification that says, John wants to use this password. Do you want to share the Wi-Fi password?
Right.
Instead of having to say, well, it's uppercase F, lowercase, Y, 312, all this kind of stuff, right? And it's so easy. That has worked out so often. Another thing, I think with iOS 18, you can go into your Wi-Fi settings. You can go and tap on the Wi-Fi password so that it can be revealed, because otherwise you just have to remember it. Like if you remember the old days, right, Jeff? We could go into the Wi-Fi settings, but you couldn't see the Wi-Fi password. It was just dots in there. And so they made that change to where you could actually copy it or you could reveal it so that you could see it. So, here's another way that I find it to be fantastic, but so confusing at the same time. There is a third way that Apple talks about that you can share your Wi-Fi password, but you don't go into your Wi-Fi settings to do this. If you go into the Passwords app, which is an app that I don't go into very much, and I know you don't go into very much because we use 1Password, and I use 1Password for everything. But if you go into the Passwords app, which is now an app, right, in iOS 26, I think it was iOS 18 or so, there is a Wi-Fi section there. So obviously there's a passwords section there. There's a Wi-Fi section there. And if you tap into the Wi-Fi section, first of all, you see all of your remembered Wi-Fi connections that you have made over the years. They're all listed there. I don't know why they're listed there separately, but
Huh.
if you tap onto the Wi-Fi that you're connected to, you can now say show network QR code. And so it creates a QR code that somebody can scan and that they'll connect to your Wi-Fi right there. Now, that's fantastic. The confusing part
Yeah.
for me is, why is this QR code not available in the Wi-Fi settings? Like, I don't know
Yeah.
why I have to go to the passwords app to find this. Just this is a fantastic option to have somebody connect to the Wi-Fi where you are. It doesn't have to be your house. Obviously, it can be your office or wherever else that you are. But why not put that into the Wi-Fi settings? I just, that boggles my mind. I'm sure there's a good reason for it. I can't think of it, but that's my tip. I just wanted you to know there are several ways that you can share your Wi-Fi passwords when you've got people coming over, for the holidays. But one of the other ways, if you don't want to share, or, sometimes that share password doesn't come up reliably all the time, I find. And so in this way, you can go into your passwords app, the passwords app, because I have to reiterate that, tap on Wi-Fi, find the network you're connected to, and you can say show QR code. And obviously lots of people know how to just use our camera to get that, and it'll give a link that you can connect, and it automatically fills in the password on there. So that's
I
my
didn't know
tip.
about this. This is cool. Do you know if it like so I just tried it for like the Wi-Fi, the public Wi-Fi here at my law firm.
At the
I
law
just
firm,
brought it
right?
up on my iPhone and I
Right?
used that iPad mini to scan it, and it instantly brought up a little thing that said, "Do you want to connect to the network?" Which actually is the network it's already connected to. So it's interesting to know that. But here's my
Right?
question. If I show this Wi-Fi password to someone at my house who has an Android device or a Windows computer, I wonder
Yeah.
if they scan it, if it will also do something to give them.
That's a
I don't
good,
know.
I don't know. That's an excellent question. In fact, I'll look it up while you do your tip, because
Yeah.
I don't know. I would assume so, Jeff, because I feel like that's just a link, right? That
Hmm.
it, I mean, a QR code is
But it's
always
more
just
than a
a
link
link.
because when I did it on my iPad mini, it
Oh,
didn't say here's
yeah.
the password. It gave me a button saying, "Do you want to connect to this network?" And so if I had hit yes, I wouldn't have had to even know what the password was. It would just connect, and
Okay,
which
I'm
is really
looking it
nice.
up.
I mean, that's the best of all worlds. That's exactly what you want. Who cares what the password is? Just let somebody get on and do this. So I'd be curious to see what happens. But it's very cool.
Yeah.
And I agree with you that although it's fantastic when you get that pop-up device on your iPhone saying, "Do you want to share the password?" And when it
Right.
works, that's
Right.
the best way to do it,
It's
right?
fantastic. I love it.
But
Yeah.
sometimes it doesn't come up when you think it would. And so this is a way to just do it. And I did not know it was an Apple's password app. So thank you for sharing that. That's a very cool tip.
So
Um,
I am the results, according to Google Gemini
mhm.
and other results. Yes, you can share. I'm looking at a video
Excellent.
now to where it has the QR passcode. Now I'm just not sure. Here, hang on. This little video is gonna, and maybe I'll link to a video or so that I think it just directs you to your Wi-Fi settings in the Android device.
Yeah,
So it looks like it should come up
interesting.
on there. Like, to me, that would make sense. Like, I feel like that would be ridiculous if Apple didn't build that in. And QR code is
Hmm.
pretty universal, right? It should
Hmm.
go to whatever component. But to your point, like, you don't want to just go to a website, and some people I know don't like putting QR codes on there, but that should work with an Android just fine.
Yeah, very cool. So my tip has to do with universal control. Universal control is the thing that if you have multiple Apple products next to each other, you can
Yes.
use the keyboard and the mouse from one device with another one. And I have been using this for years at home because at my home, I have a Mac Mini connected to a studio display. And then I will have my iPad next to me. And sometimes, yeah, in fact, the picture you just showed, you can actually see a picture of it. And sometimes I would want to use the keyboard on my Mac, like my nice big, extended keyboard, but actually to do
Yes.
something quickly on my iPad. And most of the time, it works just great. And I can actually take the cursor on my computer and I can move that cursor over to my iPad and it works great.
Yeah.
But sometimes, every once in a while, like my iPad's to the left and my computer screen's to the right, and I would move the cursor off the left edge of my screen,
Right.
expecting it to go to my iPad, and it doesn't. I'm like,
It's
do you not see it? It's right there. I mean, I don't know how they talk to each other. It's all, mumbo jumbo. But like, and then on a whim, I moved my cursor off to the opposite side of the screen, which is not where my iPad's physically located, and then it'll pop over here. I'm like, oh, for some reason you're thinking my iPad's on the right, but it's
You flip
actually on the
flop.
left, or you think
Right.
it's at the top, but it's actually on the bottom. And so I'm like, how do you fix this? And so the solution is, there's this a setting on the, for example, if you're using your Mac to do this, it's part of the displays settings. So you go into displays and you're showing it if you're anyone watching the video right now. And then when you go into displays at the very top of the screen, it has a graphical representation of, I think your computer is here
Yes.
and your iPad is maybe to the bottom left or right next to it, side by side. If you have like a laptop and an iPad, they might be side by side screens, or maybe it's even higher, but you sort of make it so that more or less as you move your cursor off the edge, it will go to the correct part of the screen, whether it's the top, the middle, or the bottom. But if you need to adjust that, there's this button at the bottom called Arrange. And as you would imagine, if you click it, it then allows you to tell the computer, yeah, here's where I want to, this is in real
Yes.
life. My iPad screen is right here compared to my Mac. Or you can even have two iPads and do this with them if you're using a dual iPad setup. And so that is just a reminder, because when it happened to me, at first I didn't know what was going on. And then once I figured off that it was out, I'm like, well, how do I fix this? Where do I go? Is it an iPad thing? Is it a computer thing? So I looked it up and put in the show notes, Brett. I put the link to the support article from Apple that
Yes.
describes it. But
I
even
see
the
it.
support article doesn't show the picture that you're pulling up right now, because that was just a screenshot I took of my Mac to show it, where it's got that button at the very bottom. So anyway, that's my tip: is
I use
if
this.
things are in the wrong
Yeah.
place, you can click that arrange button and you can put things the way they're supposed to be.
I use this all the time. So let me ask you, when you are doing this, do you have your Mac as a Mac and your iPad as an iPad?
Yep.
Because if you set them next to each other, then you're talking about sharing your cursor between your Mac and your iPad when it's still an iPad, right?
But they're still
So
being true to themselves, because that's another thing you can do.
exactly.
There's a completely different thing, is to
Yes.
share the Mac screen to the iPad. And
That's
sometimes
what
that's
I do.
useful. But
Yes.
most of the time, and I know you do it because when you and I have recorded podcasts in person together, I see you doing it. And so you're
Yeah.
basically using your iPad as a second screen for your Mac.
It's
So
an
it's like your Mac
extended
has two
desktop,
screens.
is what
And
they
that
call
is
it. Yeah.
totally useful, totally useful. But for most of what I'm doing, like I'm working on something at home, like I'm drafting a brief, and my Mac is just running Microsoft Word, and that's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
My iPad, I'm using like, good reader or something, or good notes, or one of those
Right.
PDF Expert Pro. I'm using one of those apps on my iPad to look at a
Yes.
document, to look at my
Yes.
notes. I don't need My iPad can be an iPad. But what's
Right. Right.
nice is that the cursor that's in my hand, or the keyboard that's in front of
Can
me,
use.
I can
Yeah.
just use it back and forth. Now, if you
Yes.
have a keyboard dedicated for your iPad, then you don't need this as much. Although even then, sometimes it's useful. But especially if you just got your iPad sitting there or something, that's when this is useful. Let the iPad be the iPad, let the Mac be a Mac. But
Yes.
I've already got a keyboard and a mouse. Can I just use it with both of them?
Right.
And
Right.
this is something we've talked about, and I know we'll talk about in the future more. iPad OS 26 is so incredible when it comes to using a mouse and a keyboard, but especially a mouse on the iPad, because now you can get menus and everything else. And so, like, it used to be useful to take advantage of this universal control feature, but ever since September, when we have iPad OS 26, there are
Yeah.
even more times when it's nice to be able to use that cursor from your Mac and quickly use it on the iPad and then go back to right
Yeah.
where you are.
Well, and then just quickly on the arrange button, I use this all the time, not just connecting to an iPad. Like when I go into the office, I sit at different desks. Sometimes there is a monitor that's like, high up. And so my laptop sits below it and the monitor is above it. Sometimes
Sure.
there's a monitor off to the right side or the left side. And I go into this arrange button and here's the picture. What I love about the way the Mac does this is that when I connect to an external monitor, whether it's a monitor or an iPad or whatever it may be, you can freeform wherever you want this to be. So in some cases, I'll go into the range and I'll say, if I've got the big monitor, above my laptop, then I expect, like you were saying, I want to go my mouse all the way up to the screen, and then I want it to go to the monitor sitting above the laptop screen. And so I will arrange it that way. That arrange button is great. In fact, I think there's something similar in Windows today. But
There
I
is,
have just
yeah.
found that this is superior in the way that Mac allows you to freeform it. Like when you put it in a spot, and not only that, it will remember it as well. So when I go to a different location, if it remembers that same monitor, it'll put that monitor in the same place that I had set it at the last time. So it'll do different monitors on that as well.
Windows has something similar for dual monitor setups. And I
Okay.
mean, as I'm
Okay.
talking to you right now, I do have two monitors next to each other,
Right.
and I do
Right.
use that to play. But what Windows doesn't have, to my knowledge, is anything like universal control, where you could have the same
Oh
keyboard
yeah.
and
No,
mouse.
that's
That's an Apple feature. That's an Apple
that's
feature.
Apple only.
So
Yeah, it is good. All right, good stuff. Well, thank
it's
you for getting together today. I know it's been a while, but my goodness, this is so fun to talk about. We got the iPad mini, we've got feel good videos to watch. We're getting people in the mood for the holidays. Good talking, Jeff, and we'll talk with you next week.
thanks, Brett. Bye bye, everybody.